think about data equity, we think about using data, whether it's, in silicon or in carbon, ethically and in ways that drive equitable outcomes for stakeholders, right? So that anyone who's kind of a subject to the analysis you're doing with data, the decision that you're making with data, right, has a fair shot. As you think about doing things with the best of intentions, we don't always actually do them that way, right? Even if we intend for our algorithm to be fair or to help people, that's not always the case. And I think it's because we normally lack a mechanism to really enforce our action there, right? To structure it and allow us to measure it. Fairness is very hard to define. Equity can be hard to define because it's so context specific. What is equitable in one scenario might not be equitable in another application of a similar technology, right? The other thing is that we lack incentives sometimes to actually go out and do the hard work of defining what equity means in our context and thinking about how we actually apply it in the technology that we build, right? And so the data equity framework that Christine and I co-developed is one way to get to that mechanism that allows you to actually take action. And there are three components to it. The first is the equity objective. The idea here is that we need to be able to define what it means for an equitable outcome in whatever the process that we're trying to, apply technology to could be, right? And if we take a moment to just define what is the good thing that we want, or perhaps what is the bad thing that could happen, at least it's front of mind. And we can start to think about how we're going to take action on it. The second part is the equity metric, right? If we want to measure something, if we want something to be done, we better be able to measure it. And so the equity metric is where we can think about, okay, with our objective, what are we going to observe in the real world that's going to allow us to know whether or not we're meeting the objective, right? Because it's not enough to have the intention, you have to actually measure the outcomes as well. And then the third component is just continuous monitoring and evaluation. And that's a way that we're going to, take the thing that we've developed and make sure that the equitable outcomes continue long-term. And this is a place where we really would see a process change in organizations to be able to support this long-term monitoring and evaluation.
The program that we're going to walk you through is the Parks and Recreation Citywide Scholarship Program in the next slide, which really subsidizes year-round programming for families who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so this is one of the most important childcare programs in our city. This is the program that provides after school programs, summer programs. It gives kids a place to go. And one of the things that Matthew and I actually conducted through the equity framework was whether or not this program was meeting the full need of our residents. And also within the Silicon Valley context, we wanted to understand if families, were actually getting priced out of city services like childcare. Typically, when we do these types of data analysis, the most important thing is to actually onboard ourselves in the context, because, one of the reasons or one of the ways we can actually be conscious of even our own biases, right, is actually having a good understanding of, how this program was designed back in 2008 and how it has evolved over the next 10 years. Metrics don't exist in a vacuum, and local context really matters. I think what's really interesting about studying a program like this is it paints a really good picture of how we're serving low-income communities. And I think one of the big takeaways that we had was the fact that we shouldn't talk about low-income communities or treat them like a monolith. And what in the next slide, what we'll be able to kind of show you is how we were able to actually look at the 10 city council districts in San Jose, observe their median income, and then actually look at the distribution of scholarships amongst the low-income families living in all 10, in all 10 council districts. And one of the things that we actually noticed was that the lower income families in the relatively wealthier low-income districts were still receiving scholarships at higher rates than the low-income families in the poor low-income districts. And so even in San Jose, right, even though all of these families all technically qualify for the same program, they're not accessing the program at the same rates. And that actually created opportunity for I think Matthew and I to sort of, start suggesting other ways we can be a little bit more targeted in understanding need. Our second insight is just recognizing the fact that city processes need to be people-oriented, because data is just a reduction of lived experience. And one of the things that we did as part of our work with Parks and Recreation was actually, doing a deep dive on the sign-up process, trying to understand, okay, what are the forms? What do they look like? How long are they? When do you have to submit them by? And really trying to kind of walk the shoes of families that we were trying to serve, because guess what? The numbers are just a reflection of their experience. And if processes and procedures are complex, that data will reflect that. And one of the things that we sort of noticed in the data set, so in the next slide, is that program change that the city enacted in 2015, it has actually improved outcomes, or it has improved scholarship receipts for the folks who have benefited from it in the past. But over the last 3 years, we've actually seen diminished growth in not just the number of individuals this program has served, but also the number of new individuals. And so the city, by making it easier for folks to redeem the scholarships, we also unintentionally bias towards folks who have benefited from the programs in the past. And that was helpful, because I guess for us, we just sort of realized that it's great when cities are data-driven. It's great when cities measure performance, but it's also important for us to be iterative when it comes to our equity goals. And so in the next slide, that was kind of our big takeaway, right? Where I think what started as an analysis, doing an impact assessment on a series of reforms that the city enacted in 2015, helped us actually pay attention to distribution and realize that we could be more nuanced. We could be more nuanced, and we can be more intentional in terms of how we're currently delivering citywide scholarships to low-income residents. And what's been really exciting is actually from there, we were able to work with Parks and Recreation to start, actually enacting a set of reforms. So we are actually going to start creating budget for marketing. One of the concerns that we had was we weren't spending enough money trying to market to communities that had never benefited from this in the past. And we are also going to start collecting race and household income data for the first time, so we can build these factors into the approval consideration.